The German General Staff marched toward the First World War with a confidence so deeply ingrained that it bordered on doctrine-bound arrogance, rooted in a belief that their infantry, their engineering, and above all their rifle, the Gewehr 98, stood unmatched anywhere in Europe. The G98 was more than a weapon. It embodied the German military worldview, forged in decades of scientific marksmanship theory and reinforced by a culture that revered precision as the hallmark of a modern army. Its front-locking Mauser bolt, rigid receiver, and 7.92 by 57 mm cartridge created a rifle capable of accuracy far beyond typical battlefield engagement ranges, and German officers believed wholeheartedly that infantry combat in the 20th century would be settled by carefully aimed shots delivered at 800 to 1,000 meters. This belief supported an entire infrastructure of training, manuals, shooting competitions, and range doctrines that emphasized fire discipline above all else. Every German soldier learned to treat ammunition as a precious technical resource, not something to expend rapidly. Each round fired represented deliberate intent, calculation, and control. These views were reinforced by the memory of the Boer War, where Boer marksmen armed with Mauser rifles devastated British troops at long range. German theorists believed they had extracted the correct lesson, that battlefields favored precision and patience, while assuming the British had drawn the opposite conclusion by fixating on speed. Thus, when German attaches observed British musketry training before 1914, they saw not an innovative doctrine but a troubling sign of decay. To them, British emphasis on rapid fire seemed a frantic relic of older battlefield thinking, a hangover from the age when massed volleys compensated for poor individual skill. The British soldier cycling his bolt at lightning speed looked less like a marksman and more like someone attempting to overwhelm his target by sheer noise and fury. Reports submitted to Berlin described British firing methods with disdain, mocking the idea that a soldier could reliably fire 15 aimed rounds per minute under real combat stress. German officers insisted that no one could maintain both accuracy and speed simultaneously, yet British musketry training had mastered exactly that contradiction. The British short magazine Lee-Enfield rifle, with its 10-round detachable box magazine, rear-locking bolt, and 60-degree lift, struck the Germans as unrefined and overbuilt, a weapon that traded accuracy for unnecessary mechanical speed. The very name, short magazine, suggested something stunted or compromised to German minds accustomed to long, elegant rifles built for stability. They dismissed the SMLE's looser tolerances as sloppy engineering rather than intentional design prioritizing reliability under mud, rain, and dust. In the German imagination, the Enfield belonged to an earlier era, whereas the Mauser embodied modernity. But beneath these assumptions lay the British Army's real advantage, a brutally efficient training program that had turned the SMLE into the deadliest bolt-action rifle system ever fielded. British recruits drilled relentlessly, first in dry practice, cycling the bolt tens of thousands of times until the movement became unconscious, fluid, and repeatable under any circumstance. The Mad Minute Test, the requirement to place 15 aimed rounds onto a man-sized target at 300 yards within 60 seconds, was not merely a challenge but a baseline expectation. Soldiers were not allowed to graduate until the bolt stroke became as natural as breathing. Many surpassed the minimum easily, striking targets 20 or more times within the minute. Some legendary instructors, men like Sergeant Major Jesse Wallingford, demonstrated rates exceeding 30 shots with perfect accuracy, producing firing speeds German officers simply believed impossible from a bolt-action weapon. This training embedded psychological advantages as well. Men who had drilled rapid-fire accuracy into their muscles felt a kind of calm mastery under stress, knowing they could dominate a firefight by sheer efficiency. Confidence, predictability, and mechanical smoothness. These intangible qualities could not be measured on a shooting range but emerged in full force during the war's opening battles. The true test arrived at Mons on August 23, 1914, when roughly 70,000 British soldiers held the Mons, Condé Canal line against more than 160,000 Germans of the First Army. German troops advanced expecting minimal resistance, believing they faced a small, untested force from a colonial army. Their confidence was reinforced by victories already won over Belgium and France. Thus they marched forward in dense, doctrinally approved formations designed to maximize control and firepower once in range. What they encountered instead was a type of rifle fire no European army had ever experienced. When British riflemen opened fire at effective range, the sound alone shattered German assumptions. Instead of the rhythmic cracking of slow bolt-action fire, the air vibrated with a rising roar, an unbroken cascade of detonations, so dense and so continuous that German survivors compared it to facing a belt-fed machine gun battery. Men in the first waves fell in heaps, often before they could return fire, sometimes before they even saw the British positions. Officers shouted for their companies to locate the machine guns, convinced they were being ambushed by enormous concentrations of automatics. Many believed they faced at least 30 or 40 guns. In reality, each British battalion had only 2. The rest of the fire came from disciplined riflemen executing their training with terrifying efficiency. A single British battalion, with roughly 1,000 rifles, could theoretically deliver 15,000 rounds per minute at mad-minute pace. Even at half that rate, perfectly attainable in combat, British forces produced more firepower than entire machine gun companies. Germans attempting to advance across open ground found themselves enveloped in a storm of bullets that shredded formations faster than officers could reorganize them. At Nimy Bridge, German bodies piled so quickly that progress became physically obstructed. Colonel David Campbell described German casualties stacking into a grim parapet of flesh. Units attempting to flank British positions met similar destruction because British riflemen could shift fire with extraordinary speed, their bolt cycles barely disturbing their aim. German after-action reports from Mons are filled with references to machine gun fire that did not exist. The 75th Infantry Regiment, for example, insisted that the British must have deployed at least a dozen guns against them. In reality, 4 companies of riflemen generated the effect. This misidentification became a defining feature of the early war. German troops genuinely could not believe they were facing rifle fire. Their doctrine had not prepared them for an opponent who could deliver 30 or 40 accurate shots in 2 minutes. The psychological shock was immense. German troops accustomed to methodical fire suddenly found themselves unable to lift their heads without attracting a barrage. Their carefully trained marksmanship was useless because British bullets arrived too fast, too accurately, and too consistently for them to establish firing positions. Even when Germans managed to return fire, British riflemen, cycling bolts smoothly, reloading magazines with stripper clips in under 10 seconds, breathing steadily, maintained uninterrupted dominance. The deeper irony was that German doctrine's obsession with precision doomed them at Mons. They had not trained for rapid adjustments, flexible firing rhythms, or suppression. They had trained to make each shot perfect, believing that accuracy alone would win battles. But accuracy means nothing when the enemy fires 3 or 4 times faster and hits almost as often. In the days after Mons, German staff officers struggled to reconcile battlefield reports with the small number of machine guns recovered from British positions. Some suggested the British were secretly extracting their guns before retreating. Others theorized the existence of an unknown British automatic rifle. Nobody believed the truth, that ordinary British riflemen had simply outshot them. This misunderstanding shaped German tactics for months. They began dispersing infantry formations more widely, initiating longer artillery barrages, and delaying assaults until they believed every machine gun nest was neutralized. But these changes unwittingly played into British strengths. Dispersed German troops reduced their own firepower density, enabling British defenders to pick them off at leisure. Extended artillery bombardments consumed ammunition and slowed German operations, giving British troops extra time to reposition or withdraw in good order. Even when Germans adapted reasonably well, they continued operating under the assumption that British firepower came primarily from automatic weapons, never from rifles. Meanwhile, the SMLE continued proving itself across early Western Front engagements. At Le Cateau on August 26, the Royal Scots Fusiliers and other British units again inflicted casualties so severe that German regiments mistakenly reported facing 30 or more machine guns. In reality, these defenders had only 2 Vickers guns and several hundred riflemen. As the campaign shifted toward the First Battle of Ypres, the pattern of misinterpretation persisted. Elite formations such as the Prussian Guard attacked with confidence, believing their discipline would break thin British lines, only to be torn apart by rifle fire at ranges where they had expected minimal resistance. The British 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards, for example, repeatedly held positions against overwhelming odds because their riflemen laid down a continuous sheet of fire that German units could neither match nor suppress. After each clash, German reports again exaggerated the number of machine guns by factors of 10 or more. As trench warfare solidified in late 1914, one might expect the rifle's dominance to diminish, but the opposite occurred. The SMLE was uniquely suited to trench fighting. Compact, fast-cycling, tolerant of mud, and deadly in close-quarter engagements where second chances did not exist. British troops used their rifles not only to repel assaults but to interdict movement between trenches, hitting German soldiers attempting to reinforce, carry messages, or repair fortifications. Meanwhile, German riflemen, hampered by slower actions and 5-round magazines, struggled to achieve similar effects. The G98's long barrel and bolt handle made it unwieldy in confined firing steps. Its tight tolerances, ideal for accuracy, became liabilities in thick mud. British units at Delville Wood, Guillemont, and elsewhere used rapid rifle fire to break up German counterattacks long before machine guns or artillery could be brought to bear. At Arras in 1917, when the 10th Battalion Essex Regiment faced repeated counterattacks, German observers again insisted they were under fire from numerous machine guns. Yet the Essex held their line with only 2 Vickers guns and several hundred riflemen armed with SMLEs. The Germans had still not grasped the fundamental reality that the British rifle, when paired with British training, produced a level of sustained fire that no other bolt-action rifle in the world could equal. This misunderstanding reached beyond battlefield confusion into the realm of strategic influence. German tactical doctrine increasingly relied on machine guns for defensive firepower because infantry rifles simply could not match British fire output. Infantry units reshaped formations and movement methods around the assumption that British small arms fire represented an abnormal concentration of automatic weapons. German machine guns became central to defensive lines not because German planners believed the rifles inadequate, but because experience had repeatedly shown that German riflemen alone could not suppress or outshoot British rifle companies. The British, meanwhile, used their machine guns more flexibly, knowing their riflemen already provided incredible fire density. This freed Vickers crews for enfilading roles, counterattack suppression, and defensive concentration. Such doctrinal advantages persisted into the later war years, influencing not only British tactics but also Allied perceptions of British infantry capabilities. French officers often remarked that the British rifle was effectively a semi-automatic weapon in trained hands, a claim not far from the truth. After the war, military theorists worldwide re-evaluated rifle design. The Lee-Enfield proved that battlefield effectiveness depended less on extreme range accuracy and more on sustained, combat-realistic rates of fire. The United States, having entered the war with the Springfield M1903, a rifle heavily inspired by the Mauser, took note. American troops fighting alongside British units witnessed firsthand the devastating effect of rapid bolt-action fire. These experiences directly influenced U.S. rifle development in the interwar years, culminating in the adoption of the semi-automatic M1 Garand in the 1930s. The Garand represented, in mechanical form, the same principles embodied by the SMLE: reliability, high fire rate, and battlefield practicality. The Soviet Union drew similar lessons. Their examination of Western Front combat emphasized the importance of rapid fire at practical engagement ranges. The Mauser Nagant, while rugged, lacked the SMLE's speed. Soviet designers eventually moved toward semi-automatic rifles like the SVT-40 and later toward assault rifles, guided by the idea that volume of accurate fire, not extreme precision, shaped battlefield outcomes. The SMLE itself continued serving through the Second World War and well beyond. In North Africa, British troops praised its reliability amid sandstorms that jammed semi-automatics. In Burma, its smooth action remained dependable in monsoon mud. Commonwealth forces used it with great effect in Italy, Northwest Europe, and countless smaller campaigns. Even after the war, nations across the Commonwealth retained Lee-Enfields because they remained practical, durable, and deadly in trained hands. The rifle's lasting legacy is not merely mechanical but conceptual. It reshaped global small arms doctrine by demonstrating that a rifle's true power lies in the marriage of design and training. The Mad Minute philosophy, timed, accurate, sustained fire, became ingrained in modern infantry training worldwide. Today's emphasis on controlled pairs, rapid target transitions, muscle memory shooting, and stress-tested accuracy reflects the very principles British instructors drilled into recruits before 1914. The German post-war analysis acknowledged their grave miscalculation. They had underestimated not only the British rifle but the British soldier. Their own doctrine, anchored in 19th-century precision ideals, failed to anticipate the brutal realities of industrialized warfare in which fire superiority at realistic engagement ranges mattered more than perfect accuracy at extreme distances. Their infantry had been technically skilled but doctrinally unprepared. And it was at Mons, Le Cateau, Ypres, and Arras that this truth revealed itself in the most devastating terms, as British riflemen, armed with a weapon optimized for speed, reliability, and controlled fire, repeatedly shattered German assaults, altered enemy tactics, influenced future rifle development, and left a permanent imprint on military history. The Lee-Enfield success proved that the synergy of intelligent engineering, practical doctrine, and unforgiving training could transform a bolt-action rifle into a weapon system whose influence stretched far beyond the battlefields of the First World War, echoing into the doctrine, design, and battlefield expectations of every major army of the 20th century.